There's a very particular kind of pain that doesn't scream, it whispers. It comes not from betrayal or chaos, but from absence, that heavy, aching absence that grows louder in the silence. One day, they're there, your confidant, your mirror, the one who said they'd never leave. The next, they vanish. No fight, no closure, no warning. And you're left staring at the void where they once stood, trying to understand what you did wrong. But what if this wasn't punishment? What if this wasn't rejection, but protection? The human heart is conditioned to interpret departure as failure. We cling to people like lifelines, convinced their presence validates our worth. When they leave, we unravel. But in that unraveling is a truth most never dare to consider. Sometimes they weren't removed by accident. Sometimes the heavens intervened. Think about it. How many times did your spirit feel off when you were with them? How many moments of unease did you swallow just to keep the peace? How often did your intuition whisper, "They're not meant for the version of you you're becoming"? You didn't lose them. Your soul outgrew the contract. And because you hesitated, the universe didn't. There's an ancient concept found in mysticism that speaks of spiritual quarantine, a divine separation that occurs when your frequency begins to rise. Those who once stood beside you can no longer breathe in your atmosphere. It's not personal, it's energetic. When you start shedding your old skin, those who loved that version of you will either evolve or disappear. And if they disappear, it's not because they hated you, it's because they couldn't survive your truth. This truth hits hardest when the ones removed weren't obviously toxic. Maybe they were kind, maybe they listened, maybe they held you on your darkest nights. And yet, they're gone. That's what makes it harder to understand. We expect removal to be dramatic, to come with firework, betrayal, some moral justification. But often, spiritual purification comes quietly. God doesn't always storm in with a warning. Sometimes, He just erases. And here's the paradox. The more sacred your calling becomes, the more isolated the path gets. Those who are destined to carry divine fire cannot walk crowded roads. You are not being punished. You are being cleared, emptied, stripped, not to suffer, but to prepare you for something weightier, purer, more aligned. The space that hurts now is the same space needed for what's coming. There's a story told by an old soul healer about a woman who felt abandoned by everyone after beginning her spiritual awakening. Friends stopped calling. Family grew distant. Her partner walked out. She believed she had become too intense, too different. But when she spoke to her teacher, he smiled and said, "The light you carry now burns too brightly for eyes that chose comfort over truth. You were not left, you were elevated." That phrase haunts me because it's true for so many. You're not being ignored by the people around you. Their absence is a mirror of your elevation. When you rise, you threaten the dynamics built on your smaller self. People who fed off your insecurity can't feed from your sovereignty. Those who manipulated your silence can't handle your clarity. And those who only loved you broken can't find themselves in your healing. It's tempting to reach out, to fix, to explain. But explanations are only necessary when you owe someone a continuation. In your case, the chapter is done. God wrote the ending even if you didn't see it coming. Closure is a myth in the spiritual world. Sometimes the lesson is the goodbye, and it's okay to grieve. It's human to ache. But don't confuse grief with regret. You didn't mess up. You didn't push them away. You didn't fail. You transformed. And in that transformation, certain connections short-circuited. Not because you stopped loving them, but because you started honoring yourself. What's even more revealing is how peaceful your life becomes after these removals. The chaos you thought was normal disappears. The exhaustion you carried in their presence vanishes. You start breathing deeper, thinking clearer, dreaming bigger. That's not coincidence, that's confirmation. And yet, part of you still wonders, what if they come back? What if they realize what they lost? Here's the truth. If they come back and your energy hasn't changed, the pattern will repeat. If they come back and your energy has evolved, they won't recognize you. Either way, the season has shifted. The door is closed not out of spite, but because your soul now demands sacred threshold. So next time someone vanishes without warning, don't rush to fill the space they left. Sit with it, Feel the silence. Let the echoes teach you. That emptiness is not a void. It's a sacred altar, and something or someone will arrive who doesn't just tolerate your light. They'll be built to carry it with you. There's a strange ache that comes not from the absence of others, but from the absence of understanding. When people walk away, it's not just their physical presence we mourn, but the sudden collapse of meaning we thought we had with them. You sit in your room, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how someone can go from being your everything to becoming a ghost with a name. You replay conversation, search through memories, analyze your own reactions like a crime scene investigator, but you find no crime, no closure, just silence. And in that silence, something begins to shift. What if this was never about them? What if the connection that broke wasn't supposed to last, but rather it was designed to break you open? The pain they caused, the gap they left, the questions that haunt you at night. What if all of it was a spiritual scalpel, cutting away the illusions you still clung to? In ancient spiritual traditions, there's a concept known as the sacred wound. It's the idea that certain people enter your life not to complete you, but to pierce you. Their exit creates a wound so deep that it becomes a portal, one that forces you inward, downward, into the rawest parts of your own soul. And it's there, in that darkness, that something wild and holy begins to take shape. Most people run from this kind of pain. They try to replace what was lost. They chase distraction. They numb themselves. But a few, the ones who are truly called, sit in the fire. They let the grief burn away their ego. They let the questions slice through their narratives. They let the silence scream. And eventually, they begin to hear something deeper, something older, something real. You weren't just mourning a person. You were mourning the version of you that needed them. Let that sink in. The friendships that died, the love that collapsed, the approval you stopped receiving. These were mirrored, temporary, designed to reflect a version of you that was still learning how to exist. But now you're being stripped of reflection. You're being forced to see without mirrors. That's terrifying. And yet, that's the beginning of self-realization. There's a reason mystics and prophets always speak of desert. The desert is the place where everything familiar is gone. No crowds, no praise, no guidance, just sand and sun and silence. That's where real identity is forged. That's where false attachments are burned away. That's where you finally meet the version of yourself that no one else could access. And maybe, just maybe, the people who left weren't strong enough to follow you there. We often assume that those who walk away do so because of our flaws. But what if it was your growth that unsettled them? What if your silence, your questions, your inner fire triggered their comfort zone? There's a term in psychology called dissonance fatigue. The moment someone realizes that being near you means confronting parts of themselves they've kept buried. You didn't hurt them. Your existence revealed their own refusal to evolve. And some souls, no matter how close they once were, will choose comfort over growth. That's why many spiritual awakenings come with sudden waves of loss. People you thought were permanent vanish. Those you trusted fall silent. You find yourself surrounded not by celebration, but by empty chairs. That's not punishment, that's preparation. Because when you step into the next phase of your calling, your energy will become so precise, so piercing, that only the brave will be able to walk beside you. There's a hidden grace in this, a violent mercy. You don't have to keep negotiating your worth. You don't have to chase people just to feel seen. The removals were invitations. The silence is a sanctuary. And the void? That's where your real allies are being called to meet you. It's funny how, once enough time passes, you start to see what you were blind to before. That friend who always interrupted you when you spoke. That partner who subtly manipulated your emotion. That family member who only showed up when they needed something. At the time, you labeled it love. But now, with clearer vision, you see it for what it was: survival dynamic, energetic contract, karma being played out. You were never meant to carry them forever. You were meant to graduate. Graduation often looks like loneliness, because no one throws a party for the soul that chooses alignment over attachment. But the quiet triumph is real. Every day you choose authenticity over approval. You're breaking generational cycle. Every boundary you set is a declaration. I will not shrink to be loved. And every time you let someone walk away without begging them to stay, you honor the version of you that's finally ready to rise. There's one more truth most won't tell you. The more you grow, the less noise you make. You stop needing to prove yourself. You stop chasing validation. You start realizing that the most powerful energy in the room is the one that doesn't beg to be seen. And suddenly, the silence that once felt like abandonment becomes your greatest weapon. Because silence isn't emptiness, it's containment, it's sacred compression. It's the storm gathering its force before the lightning strikes. The people who disappeared from your life weren't just individuals with names and faces. They were symbols. Each one of them carried a lesson, a karmic echo, a message wrapped in flesh and blood. And when they left, they didn't just walk out the door. They tore through layers of illusion you didn't even know you had. That ache you felt when they left? It wasn't just heartache. It was soul recalibration. You were being rewired. And here's the most disorienting part. The departure wasn't random. It was orchestrated. There are forces beyond your understanding, spiritual currents, energetic contracts, divine timings that guide your evolution in ways that rarely make sense in the moment. That friend who turned cold overnight? That relationship that crumbled without explanation? That group you no longer resonate with? They weren't failures, they were permissions, cosmic permissions to evolve, to detach, to remember who you were before the world taught you how to perform. There's a phenomenon in nature called controlled burn. It's when forests are intentionally set on fire to clear out invasive species, dead roots, and accumulated debris. It looks destructive, but it's a form of healing. It makes room for new growth. In the same way, some losses in your life were necessary fires. They scorched what was no longer aligned. They removed the overgrowth of codependency. And now, you're standing in the ashes of what used to define you, terrified but free. That freedom feels empty at first, because for so long, you wrapped your identity around other people's acceptance. You learned to read the room before you read yourself. You shaped your words to avoid rejection. You filtered your emotions to fit into boxes that were never built for your soul. But the more you wake up, the more those habits begin to itch. You start to see how much of yourself you gave away just to belong. And the pain of that realization, it's brutal, but it's sacred. Because for the first time, you're not looking to be chosen. You're choosing yourself. This shift is more than emotion. It's energetic. When you stop vibrating at the frequency of self-abandonment, the people who were magnetized to your wounds begin to repel. That's not rejection. That's alignment. It's like tuning a radio. As your frequency changes, the static disappears, but so do the old song. You don't hear what you used to, but what you do hear now, it resonates deeper. And in that new silence, you start to sense something ancient moving through you. Call it God, call it Source, call it your higher self. Whatever name you use, the part of you that remembered. It doesn't speak in words, it speaks in clarity. In the sudden knowing that you're not here to beg for crumbs, that your presence alone is thunder, that your stillness is not apathy, it's power under control. Let's talk about power. Not the kind that dominates, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that radiates without effort, the kind that walks into a room and shifts the atmosphere without needing to say a word. That kind of power is born in solitude. It's born in the moments where you sit alone on the floor, tears in your eyes, realizing no one is coming to save you. And then something inside you stands up and says, I don't need saving, I need remembering. And you begin to remember. You remember how your ancestors prayed with their hands in the dirt and their eyes to the stars. You remember how every wound in your lineage was asking for someone brave enough to stop the cycle. You remember that the very ache you carry is the map to your medicine, that everything that broke you was actually breaking a curse, that maybe, just maybe, the pain wasn't punishment, it was initiation. Initiation into what? Into sovereignty, into energetic integrity, into the kind of presence that no longer needs explanation. When people walk away now, you don't chase, you bless. You understand that not everyone can hold space for your evolution. Some only knew how to love the version of you that stayed small, and that's okay. They were chapters, not conclusions, temporary characters in a story that's now demanding a new level of authorship. Because you're not just the protagonist anymore, you're the writer. And the story you're writing, it's not about revenge. It's not about proving them wrong. It's not even about healing for their sake. It's about reclaiming the parts of you that you gave away too easily. The laughter you silenced, the creativity you suppressed, the truth you swallowed just to keep the peace. You're calling all of it back, piece by piece, breath by breath. This is the return, not to who you were before the pain, but to the version of you that the pain revealed, the real you. The one who doesn't perform but radiates, the one who doesn't need to be understood to feel seen, the one who knows that solitude isn't punishment, it's sacred space. And in that space, you're not just healing, you're becoming dangerous. Dangerous to every system that profits off your self-doubt. Dangerous to every manipulator who fed off your need for approval. Dangerous to the lies that told you that you had to be anything other than exactly who you are. There's a moment in every awakening when you realize the ones who left couldn't stay. Not because you weren't lovable, not because you weren't enough, but because your expansion became a mirror too loud for their silence. Your healing disrupted their comfort. Your growth reminded them of their stagnation. And nothing is more threatening to someone who avoids their own evolution than watching someone else embody theirs. It wasn't personal, it was energetic. When you start aligning with your truth, you activate a kind of light that not everyone is ready to face. That light reveals things, false loyalty, hidden intentions, subconscious contracts of control and guilt. It strips away the polite mask. It brings the unspoken to the surface. And those who built connection with the version of you that hid, that shrunk, that kept quiet, they start to suffocate in the presence of the version of you that finally breathes freely. But here's the hard truth. Some of them never loved you. They loved the role you played, the version of you that was agreeable, predictable, soft-edged, the one who made them feel needed, the one who never disrupted the dynamics, the one who kept their secrets while burying your own truth. The moment you stopped playing that role, the connection dissolved. Because it was never real, it was a transaction. You gave peace, they gave approval. You offered loyalty, they offered conditions. You brought your soul. They only showed up when they needed your silence. So when they disappeared, it wasn't abandonment, it was revelation. And now you see it clearly. All those red flags you excused, all those gut feelings you silenced, all the ways you made yourself smaller just to avoid rocking the boat, now they scream with clarity. The boat needed to be rocked because you were drowning in it. And you don't need people who only love you when you're quiet about your needs. You don't need connection that demands you to betray yourself to maintain it. You need alignment. And alignment costs. It costs attachments. It costs comfort. It costs illusions you've carried since childhood. But what you gain in return is everything. You gain clarity so sharp it cuts through manipulation before it even reaches your spirit. You gain discernment so powerful you no longer entertain energy that feels even slightly off. You gain a relationship with yourself that is so deep, so unshakable, that being alone no longer feels like a punishment. It feels like peace. And from that peace, something wild begins to emerge. Not wild in a reckless way, wild in a holy way. The wildness of someone who remembers they were never meant to be tame. The wildness of someone who stopped asking for permission to exist. The wildness of a soul who refuses to apologize for evolving. That version of you doesn't fit neatly into anyone's expectations, and that's the point. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to be authentic, and authenticity repels the performative. It's magnetic to the few and repulsive to the many. That's why the more you step into who you truly are, the more people fall away. It's not because you're broken, it's because your wholeness confronts their denial. Your voice shatters the illusion they cling to. Your light burns through the fog they're not ready to leave. And so they distance themselves, not because you're too much, but because your presence reveals how little of themselves they're willing to face. Let them go. Let them retreat into the safety of what they can control. Let them stay in the narratives that require your absence to make sense. You have a different path now, one that doesn't circle back to comfort or compromise, one that leads forward, into truth, into presence, into purpose. But this journey can get lonely, not because you're unworthy of connection, but because genuine connection is rare, especially when your frequency rises. It's like climbing a mountain. The higher you go, the fewer people you find. But the ones who are there, they're real. They've bled the same truth. They've burned through the same illusion. They don't need you to shrink. They recognize your fire because they carry their own. So don't rush to fill the silence. Don't chase after the ones who turned their backs when your spirit rose. That silence, it's sacred. It's the space where the universe speaks clearly. It's the womb of your next becoming. It's the place where power is no longer loud, but alive. Where your worth isn't measured by attention, but by the energy you refuse to waste. And the more you rest in that energy, the more unshakable you become. Because you've seen what happens when people walk away, and you survive. You've felt the sting of solitude, and you found strength there. You've watched your life fall apart, and you built a new one, brick by intentional brick. Now, nothing scares you. Not their absence, not their opinion, not even the unknown. Because when you've walked through fire, silence is no longer empty. It's holy. There's a reason your energy changed when they left. Not just because of their absence, but because space was finally created for your essence to expand. When those people walked away, when ties dissolved, when the phone stopped ringing, something far more important began to happen. You began hearing yourself again. You began remembering the version of you that didn't require validation to feel real. Because here's the truth. Their absence wasn't a punishment. It was permission. Permission for you to exist beyond the limitations they were comfortable placing on you. Permission for you to rediscover what joy sounds like when it isn't filtered through someone else's approval. Permission to move, breathe, speak, think, and dream without censoring yourself, to fit within a script that was never written for your soul. And as the silence settled in, you started hearing something you had long forgotten, the sound of your own spirit, not the voice of ego, not the voice of fear, not the anxious loop that plays when we crave connection, but the deep, grounded knowing that comes from within, the kind that whispers, "You're not broken, you're becoming." This is the great paradox of spiritual awakening. What feels like loss is often realignment. What looks like rejection is often redirection. And what feels like collapse is often preparation for expansion. You weren't meant to carry everyone with you into your next chapter. Some of them were only ever meant to be part of the prologue. Think about it. Have you ever looked back on a moment of heartbreak and realized it was the doorway to something better, something deeper, something more aligned? That's not a coincidence. That's initiation. The universe doesn't just take away to hurt you. It clears paths. It disrupts patterns. It cuts cords that were choking your destiny. Sometimes the most divine intervention is the one that feels like betrayal in the beginning. Because spiritual growth doesn't always feel like light. Sometimes it feels like being set on fire from the inside. Not to destroy you, but to burn away everything that isn't really you. Every lie you told yourself to survive. Every mask you wore to be accepted, every role you played to avoid abandonment. That fire is sacred. It purifies, it frees, and now you're freer than you've ever been. Not because you've found new people to replace the old one, but because you no longer need to be surrounded to feel supported. You've become your own sanctuary. You've learned to find stillness in your solitude, clarity in your silence, and power in your pain. You've stopped trying to be understood by those who can't even see themselves. That's evolution. And with it comes a deeper kind of peace, the kind that no longer negotiates your present, the kind that doesn't beg to be chosen, the kind that sits in a room full of people and doesn't feel the need to perform. Because once you've been emptied of everything false, you stop chasing what's shallow. You start attracting what's real. You start recognizing the difference between attention and respect, between presence and alignment, between company and connection. You no longer settle for energy that drains you just to avoid being alone. You don't shrink to avoid making others uncomfortable. You don't explain your healing to people committed to misunderstanding you. You simply live, and in that quiet, grounded way of living, something miraculous begins to unfold. You draw in people who match your frequency, not the old patterns of codependency, guilt, or obligation, but souls who see you without projecting onto you, souls who don't flinch at your depth, souls who respect your boundaries, not as limitations, but as sacred spaces. But here's the part that no one tells you about healing. The ones who were removed feel it too. They might not say it, they might never admit it, but when your energy disappears from their life, there's an echo. They feel the weight of your silence. They feel the absence of your compassion, your presence, your loyalty. Because your light didn't just serve you, it held them together too. And when it's gone, they're left to face the very thing they ran from in the first place, themselves. That's why they're watching. That's why they're quiet. That's why some of them linger in your orbit through silence, pretending they've moved on, when deep down they know they lost something rare. And it terrifies them, because what they realize, too late, is that your silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. You're no longer trying to be understood. You're no longer trying to prove your worth. You're no longer showing up where your energy isn't honored. You've graduated from seeking justice to embodying peace, from explaining yourself to simply being yourself, from attachment to alignment. And the most powerful part? You did it quietly. No explosion, no revenge, no dramatic goodbyes, just distance and growth. Now, they don't know how to reach you, not because you've blocked them, but because they no longer have access to the version of you who would have answered. And that's what haunts them. You didn't disappear, you ascended.